Life in China began with the patient effort of humble farmers. Yet, when it comes to landscape architecture, China's great walls, tombs, and palace complexes have been gigantic ever since ancient times. Its political history is one of great military empires, with all-powerful imperial dynasties lasting hundreds of years and commanding almost unlimited servants and laborers. Staggering in scale and coursing thousands of miles across mountaintops and deserts, the Great Wall of China is an almost unimaginable human effort. But it was not, in fact, a singular project. Construction was spread over nearly 2,000 years and through many successive dynasties. The first emperor of China founded the Qin dynasty, uniting 6 warring states by force in the 3rd century BC. It was he who decreed that the various walls be modified and linked together as a continuous 2,000-mile barrier. It was the beginning of a titanic effort embodying power, possession, and social order, and the regulation of millions of people over many centuries. Ultimately, its use was both practical and symbolic, separating civilized culture from the barbarians and exiles. Large portions remain today as one of the world's largest and most recognizable works of landscape architecture. The first emperor also spent huge resources creating a tomb for his afterlife. It was in the form of a vast mound of earth covering many treasures and a map of his empire. Outside, surrounding the mound, he arrayed an army of terracotta soldiers. These soldiers represented the troops with which he had built and defended his empire. They were meant to intimidate his enemies, both real and spiritual. He believed that ghost warriors can see only 2 dimensions and in black and white, and cannot distinguish real soldiers from their shadow-like copies. Every soldier has a personal uniform, individual portrait-like features, and a particular hairstyle. They were ready for battle. Closer to the mound are the command headquarters with officers and generals deep in planning the campaign ahead. Originally, the figures were housed in long sheds, protecting the central mound. But in the tumult following the death of the emperor and the fall of the Qin Empire, sheds were attacked and burned. Over the centuries, the soldiers disappeared deep beneath drifting soil. The government has erected a massive hall to protect them as they gradually sift and brush away 2,000 years of accumulated earth. The central tomb, as of 2013, remained unopened as archaeologists carefully extracted and reassembled each soldier. The vast scale of the imperial tomb is repeated in much later imperial complexes, such as the famous Forbidden City in the center of Beijing. Begun in the 15th century, this was the seat of power for the Manchu dynasty until the last emperor was forced from his throne by the new Republican government in 1912. High walls separate the city of Beijing from these courtyards, There are moats, bridges, and gigantic court buildings. At the center of the complex is the entrance to the palace. 2 staircases for court officials flank a plain of sculptured clouds over which the emperors were carried in a palanquin, never touching the ground. The scale of the Forbidden City is matched at the Summer Palace, where the imperial court retreated from the heat of Beijing. Built in the 17th century, on a lake plied with cooling breezes, the vast palace dimensions are best understood from the deck of a dragon boat with the rest of the tourists. Kunming Lake is artificial, and the earth dug from it was used to build Longevity Hill, capped with a pagoda. Tree-shaded walks, designed for the pleasure of the imperial court, now provide cool recreation for thousands of tourists from the city. Thus, what was once the private preserve of emperors easily accommodates the crowds of modern China. The walks, the pagodas, the tea houses of marble, all exist in harmony with the moving water and plants of the natural world. Even the emperor's power was suffered only as long as it existed in harmony with nature under heaven. This carved boulder, where sculptured waves interface with the natural surface, illustrates how art complements nature. Another symbol of this harmony is the dragon, twisting through sky and landscape in the decoration of boats and architecture. The landscape of China can be beautiful to the point of seeming improbable. It is a source of inspiration for many of the arts, including both painting and sculpture. This is particularly true around the Li River and the Three Gorges area of the Yangtze River. The ghost city of Fengdu has commanded a site far above the river for 2,000 years. The visitor walks by statues of struggling demons who threaten evildoers and encourage commitment to the Buddha and his teachings. This is Chinese folk art at its best. Lively, colorful, half terror and half humor, it is Buddhism tinged with showmanship. On top of the mountain are gates and temples where chorus lines of evil demons flank the spectator. It is called Ghost Torturing Pass and leads to peace and harmony and the authority of the Buddha. Nearby, carefully framed and balustrated views of the Great Valley and the Li River system reassert the ancient values of harmony under heaven. Far below, on the Yangtze River side, are roofless villages being torn down and salvaged before the flooding, as the river is backed up by the Three Gorges Dam project. This is the largest dam in the world and will control the periodic flooding of the Three Gorges area of the Yangtze. It will also improve navigation in all seasons and supply electrical power for China's future. The water will eventually rise 175 meters above present levels, drowning ancient artifacts, villages, and even small cities. The rising river requires great sacrifices on the part of the inhabitants, who have farmed and lived for generations on the fertile and well-watered land near the river. They must take apart their buildings and rebuild them above the 175-meter mark. Thus, the tradition of sacrificing individual liberties for the good of the state, already seen in the Great Wall, continues in contemporary China. Such huge projects are easier to accomplish in a country where sacrifice and group action have been the norm. Thus, the movement of whole populations is a more realistic possibility here than it would be in the West. Tiananmen Square in Beijing was designed by Chairman Mao and the Communist Revolutionary Government as the central gathering place for the Chinese people. Its many acres of paved surface make it one of the largest squares in the world. Loudspeakers deliver martial music and patriotic speeches. The space is bounded by government buildings. On one end is a building with a huge portrait of Chairman Mao, guarded by attentive soldiers. Mao's resting place has a court of super-realistic statues in heroic postures, fighting for the revolution. The prow of one statue group features the Red Book of Mao's wisdom. Here, small children begin to learn of the communist revolution. Spare, disciplined, and rigorous, this architecture contrasts with the indulgent, decorative splendor of palaces and gardens of China's imperial past. Designed to accommodate thousands of citizens and a destination for visitors from all over the world, the square also reminds us of the single-minded ideological focus which led to the so-called Cultural Revolution of the 1960s. Those were bitter days. Mao created the infamous Red Guard of China's youth, which rejected and destroyed much of China's rich artistic heritage. Some of China's landscape art has been lost, but much remains, encapsulated in the great cities. Shanghai, Beijing, Guilin, each incorporates parts of the ancient imperial and more recent colonial past. While new structures grow on every side, these are often exuberant and high-tech, with glass and steel curtain walls reflecting a fascination with designs originating in the West. This is the Chinese miracle with which the ancient culture opens the 21st century.